Hello, I'm Tim Loughton, Member of Parliament for East Worthing and Shoreham, and welcome to the latest of my podcasts. And today I wanted to deal briefly with the subject of the funding of schools in West Sussex, what's been called the fair funding problem. And it's a problem that we've had for some years and is not getting any better. Now, you may be one of the many parents who've written to me and indeed to MPs throughout West Sussex to express your concerns and the concerns of heads at all our local schools that West Sussex pupils are just not getting a fair deal. The simple facts are that the amount of money that the government provides for pupils will be much higher if you are at a school in London than it is in rural counties and in particular West Sussex, which is right at the bottom of the heap. If, for example, you are a pupil at a school in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, then you will receive something like £7,014 per pupil per annum. And yet if you're in West Sussex, equivalent to age and equivalent to school, that amount is just £4,196 every year. And as I say, West Sussex is the worst funded shire county in the whole of England. If West Sussex was just funded at the average for all local authorities, then the amount we would receive would be something like £4,612. Now, spread across all our pupils, that amounts to an extra £41 million. So if West Sussex was just funded at the average rate of all the other local authorities across the country, then there will be an extra £41 million in the kitty for pupils in West Sussex. Now, that's meant that our schools have been underfunded for some time. That's meant that West Sussex County Council has often had to pick up the tabs to meet some of that differential. That problem has been made worse by the additional costs for pay rises that have come in for teachers, by the increases in national insurance, which will all add to the bills at a time when the pressures on schools are rising and that money is having to be spread more thinly. So it's a historic problem and it's just not fair. A child who's at school, a secondary school, a primary school, in my constituency in Ada or in Worthing, should be treated no differently to an equivalent child in any part of the country. But as it stands, West Sussex is coming off particularly badly. Now, many heads have written to parents, and I have spoken to many heads. I've had many meetings with heads of local schools, along with other West Sussex MPs, are very concerned that their budgets are being stretched. In some cases, they've not been able to fill teacher vacancies that they would like to, and in some cases, they're having to look potentially at possible redundancies. There have also been some stories going around that they might have to consider four-day opening of schools. I think that is extreme, that's alarmist, and certainly it mustn't come to that. But clearly there's a very serious problem, and our pupils are at a disadvantage. So I, along with all my fellow West Sussex MPs, have been lobbying the government for some time to take up this injustice. Last year we lobbied the Education Secretary and the government. We had a number of meetings with ministers, and as a result of that and other pressure, in the spending review at the end of 2015, and indeed it was a commitment in the Conservative Party manifesto at the last election, the government agreed to revisit the funding formula by which they determine how much each local authority gets to fund pupils in that particular area. That was a major victory, and going with that, actually, the government also announced that they would allocate a further 500 million over the next few years to make sure there was additional core funding to help smooth that transition. Now, originally the government promised that the new funding formula, after consultation, which is going on at the moment, would come in the financial year 2017-2018, i.e. April of next year. Now, that meant there was a gap when schools were still having to tighten their belts, but we could see light at the end of the tunnel. Unfortunately, the government's recently announced with the new Education Secretary that the consultation is going to take longer. And to be fair, this is not an easy process, because invariably it will mean that certain parts of the country will effectively lose money and authorities so badly funded like West Sussex will gain, but it will be at somebody else's expense unless the government can find a large amount of extra money to fill that gap altogether. But given the restraints on the economy at the moment, that again is quite a challenge. So the government's now announced that the new formula won't come in until 2018-19, and of course there is a possibility that it will be a gradual introduction. It won't all happen in one foul swoop in April 2018. So that's obviously very worrying, and that's why head teachers have raised this issue again. I know they've written to many parents. Many parents have written to me. There are some points in the letter which I'm afraid are slightly misleading, and some parents have now understood it as meaning that there is money there, but it's all now going to academies or to the new grammar school proposals. Well, that's not the case. The two things are completely different. Academies are funded at exactly the same formula as those schools still controlled by local authorities. So this problem is affecting academies in my constituency in just the same way as all the other schools which are run by the West Sussex County Council Education Department. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we certainly agree with the head teachers that this is a problem. We absolutely stand side by side with the parents who want to have fairer funding to get a better deal for their pupils, so they shouldn't be disadvantaged in this way. So the MPs have again been lobbying ministers to say, look, if there is going to be this delay in bringing this new funding formula, which will hopefully resolve the situation. This situation's been going on since about 2006, 2007. Then can we at least have some transitional funding? The heads came forward with the suggestion that if we were to get some 20 million per annum extra until the new formula comes in, that's about half of what actually we should be entitled to if we were funded, if you remember, at the average rate, then that would tide them over. So we will again ask ministers what are the opportunities, the chances of getting some transitional funding because of the urgency of the situation now. And to that end, we have a meeting with the Schools Minister, Nick Gibb, who also happens to be an MP in West Sussex, the MP for Bognor Regis and Littlehampton. So he will be having similar correspondence from his own constituents and to see it at first hand in his own schools. We'll be meeting him on the 18th of October. We'll be joining head teachers presenting a petition at number 10 to take us right to the top to show what a big issue this is. And then a few weeks later, we're also meeting with the new Secretary of State for Education, Justine Greening. So this is something we are taking very seriously. This is absolutely injustice that disadvantages all children across West Sussex, which we and they and you should not have to put up with. I will keep posting updates on this section of my website. I would encourage parents, they don't need to write to us. We are already on side with this, but certainly write to the Secretary of State for Education to express their concerns, your concerns about the way the funding formula does need to be changed, but it needs to be changed urgently, and in the interim, we need some additional funds to help tide us over. So I hope you will appreciate we're all on the same side on this. It's a difficult time for funding across the whole of government. But frankly, if you don't get it right at the early stages of a child's education, then potentially that child will be disadvantaged for many years to come. It's time that we had a fair funding formula for children at schools in West Sussex. It's the right thing to do. It's been an injustice that's been around for far too long, and I certainly, for one, will do everything I can to make sure we get a proper solution for our kids.